Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Pop Culture Retro. We are thrilled today, very excited. Ike and I have been looking forward to this for a while. We have the voice of Dee Dee in Dexter's Laboratory, Constance Hatchaway in the Haunted Mansion ride. She was the first female announcer for ESPN's draft coverage, provides many of the voices of the Disney rides, like Jessie from Toy Story. I could go on and on with her credits, but please help me welcome Cat Cressida. Cat, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here on this lovely cloudy Sunday in lovely Los Angeles, California.
Oh, is it cloudy?
We know how unusual that is, don't we?
Actually, it is, yeah.
we're both in Florida here, so so we have the other park here.
Mucky, moist, lovely Florida.
Right, exactly. Well, we wanted to start. The first thing that I wanted to, when I read your bio. Your bio is absolutely fascinating. You come from a Disney background, a Disney family, kind of, in a way.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, your father worked with, your father did a lot of stuff for Disneyland, worked with the Imagineers. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Your family growing up in with that experience? That sounds amazing to me.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm happy to share that. And actually, it's going to lead to an amazing anecdote that I think Ike will be thrilled with.
Oh.
So strap in your seatbelts for this one, guys.
All right. Well, I'm sitting down.
Okay. So basically, yeah, my dad worked in marketing and graphics,
Right.
Something that he picked up while he was in the Army, and ended up being in advertising. So for about a minute, when I was first born, we moved out to Chicago. And interestingly enough, we were in this apartment building in Chicago, and this is in the early 70s. And Sonny and Cher were our next door neighbors. This is before they really blew up. I'm not sure what they were doing in Chicago, but
Wow.
every morning, my mom would go down to the little sandbox. She'd bring 2 mugs of coffee, and she'd silently pass one to the other person sitting on the park bench, and that was Cher, who never said a word.
Oh my God.
And played in the sandbox with Chastity. So we have pictures of this. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh.
So we're there for a minute, and then we moved back to Los Angeles, and my dad worked with some advertising agencies, and then ended up going over to KHJ. Do you know what KHJ was back in the day?
Man, I don't remember KHJ.
Okay, so any Quentin Tarantino fans, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's literally the radio station you hear every time Brad Pitt's in the car driving and you hear him listening.
Oh, wow.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, of course.
The whole movie, it's KHJ, and it's got the
Wow.
original KHJ sing-song little slogan and everything. And so he worked for that, and somehow KHJ and Disney Disney owned KHJ, or owned the parent company of KHJ, which was the radio station in Los Angeles back when radio was king. I mean, in the early 70s,
Mm-hmm.
radio was king of advertising. So therefore, every time there was like something at Disneyland going on, something new, some new attraction, or some sort of event going on, or a Disney movie, KHJ was the primary advertiser all over Southern California. And they'd make t-shirts and bumper stickers, because that was a big thing in the 70s. And so consequently, I got dragged into a lot of things when I was like 3, 4, 5 years old. Schlepped to a lot of like premieres and things that I was too young to appreciate. But there was one in particular that I completely went so gaga over that my dad made sure that I met one of the stars, and that was Witch Mountain.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
So
wow.
I had already seen it twice, and my dad was like, "We're gonna go to another event," and I was like, "No, I want to go to Disneyland." He's like, "You're gonna like this one," and I don't remember where it was. I feel like you're gonna know better than me, but my brain tells me that it was one of the big event theaters, either in Westwood or in Hollywood. Does that ring a bell? Like any?
You know, it's so funny because people, I mean, I've often tried to remember if there was any kind of major events that I went to that I don't recall. We had our cast and crew screening at the studio on the lot in the theater
Oh,
there.
okay.
And that was our big, opportunity to see the film for the first time. So I probably didn't, if they happened, which I have no doubt they did, I probably didn't attend them that I
No,
recall.
you were at this one.
Okay, well then okay, there you go.
You were at. I think it
There
was
you go.
at
Thank you.
Westwood. No.
It's
think
so
it was
strange to me the things I remember and the things I don't
right.
remember, and it was
I know.
that was an overwhelming period of time. But
I'm sure.
yeah, I have some recollection, and actually Kim remembers an event kind of like this, and we've kind of talked about it and tried to square up our recollection. So thank you for helping me kind of triangulate this. Now we have three sources. So
well,
how fun.
Yeah, I'd read so I saw the movie twice. I fell in love with it. Then I read the book. And it was I'm sure you get this all the time at fan conventions. So here I am, just becoming another fan very, very quickly here. Not to take us too far down this path, because I'm sure you're talking about other things. But
I'm not familiar with the film, so go ahead.
Seriously?
No,
no, he's joking. We go on about it often.
So, I was going through a rough time because my parents were getting a divorce. And so, like a lot of kids, this was very traumatic. And I was right at the age where I was understanding everything. Knew what was going on. My younger brother, fortunately, had no clue. So he was 2 years younger and was oblivious to what was getting torn apart. But for some reason, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot, what Tony and Tia were going through for some reason really resonated for me, because suddenly I felt like an abandoned orphan, which is absurd because I wasn't on a foreign planet, and I did not have magical powers that I was aware of. But it was a big deal for me. So when my dad tried to introduce me to you and to Kim, of course I acted like every fan who was completely confident leading up to the moment. And I was like 3 or 4. I was really young.
Wow.
I completely lost it. Like,
oh wow.
Stared, couldn't get it, hey, this is who you wanted to meet. Could not get a word out. It was like I was completely paralyzed on the spot. And I very clearly remember you, because you very graciously just kind of like looked awkward and said something like, well, hey, or something, like you were like, I'm not sure what to do in this situation, because you were young too. And it was this awesome moment.
That's a remarkably young age to have seen the film and related to it. I mean, I'm seriously impressed, because I've heard a lot of stories. Yes, there are many parallels to young people who were going through difficult times, and that film really gave them a sense of identity that really blows me away. It really does. It's deeply moving to me. But you are probably the youngest person I've ever heard of who identified an age that they saw it and it had an impact on them. So that's rather incredible. You are very much ahead of your time then.
Yeah. And I carried around the book. The book had like a picture from the movie on the cover, in tandem as part of the marketing for the movie. And I carried that around forever.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then one of my aunts in New Jersey. Go ahead.
Oh no! I was going to say they did a republishing of the novel with our artwork from the film, which I've probably got 2 copies up on my shelf right now.
So anyway, so there's the crossover with my history and your history and KHJ.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that, because I kept looking at your resume and trying to line up our careers and our lives, and I've wondered why you and I hadn't met or hadn't worked together at some point, and now I know we have. So that's all. We can check that off the list. But anyway, I'm so sorry if I was awkward. I wish I'd had a better response for you back then.
You weren't awkward. I was the one who realized. And I would hardly call that working together. I hope we do work together at some point, but we definitely were in the same space for something special for you. And it was probably my first fan event. We've got stories about me meeting Mark Hamill
Mm.
Oh, wow.
Star Wars, and we've got a story about me meeting Leonard Nimoy, which I thought
Awesome.
was a very, very bad story.
You covered the
And
whole.
I mean,
Can we hear that then? If you preface it like that.
no,
No.
no, enough about
Okay.
the early 70s stuff. But yeah, now
You
if
have
you
the
go
whole
back and look,
science fiction. Yeah.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you'll hear KHJ on the radio the entire
Oh,
movie.
yeah, I've seen it
I did.
twice. Now I have to watch it a third time. I
I have to watch it
absolutely
again too.
I love that film. And
Same here. Yeah.
Great movie.
yeah. Anyway, we probably have too many little stories we can tell in the midst of all this, but we want to get on with your career because I have to tell you, I'm fanboying out on you because I'm going to say this up front and I'm going to shut up. But of everything that I've done and all the experiences I've had in the business, my favorite people to work with were voiceover artists. And you are amongst what I consider like the titans of the industry, the truly gifted people who can do amazing things that I could only dream of. And I love working with them, being around them. And, talent like yours really impresses me greatly. So I'm really super excited to have you here and hear about your experiences in the industry.
Well, thank you. But I'm gonna say out loud because it's important for me to say it. I'm not one of the titans of the industry. I look up and bow to the titans of the industry. I'm lucky to be swimming in the same swimming pool, but there's some amazing talent out there. But thank you for saying that. And just before which part of the world are you guys in? You're both East Coast? You're both Florida?
Yeah, we're both in Florida.
Both Florida.
We're a few hours away from each other, but yes, I'm in Central Florida and he's on the East Coast.
Southeast,
Okay, so
yeah.
Southeast.
Do you ever come out to LA for any reason? This is going back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood really quickly.
I have,
yeah,
I occasionally get out. I was out in 2009 for the premiere of Race to Witch Mountain when that film came out, and then my wife and I visited 4 or 5 years ago. But it's not a regular thing for me these days. I'm usually out there if I have a reason to be there. Yeah.
Well, this is not going to be a big enough reason, but the next time you're out, shoot me an email because I'm friendly with the owners of the famous restaurant that was highly featured in that movie, the El Coyote Cafe. Of course.
Oh, wow.
That was one of the first restaurants I ate at when my family moved to Los Angeles back in the 60s. So El Coyote is one of my favorite places.
It's amazing.
Yes.
The wine margaritas are bananas, and we can get the Sharon Tate table or another table, and it'll be my treat, and we will pour it out until
I will make it so, I promise.
Make things so.
Yes.
All right.
Well, I wanted to follow up with that. Afterwards, I love this that you worked as a cast member later on, and one of the things that I've seen with you, and I want to hear a little bit about the whole experience of being a cast member after being in this whole Disney environment growing up. But I heard in one of your interviews that there were male and female roles that they did not cross over at times. Disney.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. So being a cast member was an incredible experience. I did it sort of my parents were absolutely against it because I lived up in Los Angeles proper, which anybody who knows LA, a lot of people assume Disneyland is like in LA, and of course it's not. No. It's about an hour south in Anaheim. And I was 15 and a half, 16, and I really, really wanted to work there. And of course, I'd just gotten my temporary license. And they were like, there's, over my dead body, are you taking a job as a cast member, driving the 5 freeway twice a day for an hour and a half, 2 hours? And I was like, that's fine by me. And so I went out and got like am I allowed to curse on this one? I got the crappiest stick shift in the world. It was all I could afford from my bat mitzvah and my babysitting money. And I'll never forget. It was like really not a great car, but it got me there and back. And I literally was driving there and back until I became friendly with other cast members, and then I would crash, so it was like an ongoing slumber party situation, but it was a summer, and it was anything you could picture the ideal summer job being. it was that, and it was at a perfect time for that, because there's been many regimes that have handled the parks. There's been many sort of different groups, so to speak, of execs and different philosophies behind every new person who took over as president. And this was during the early 90s. Yes. And it was an amazing time, because it was sort of this crossover period where Disneyland was getting its gears back in motion to become this major entertainment mecca.
Right,
But
the empire. Yeah.
yeah, but it wasn't, and it's hard for people who are younger, like my social media manager. She's like in her 20s, and to her it's bananas that there was a time that Star Wars and Marvel were not part of Disney. And I'm like,
Yeah.
trust me.
Yeah.
Growing up, Disney was Disney. And even that, even like during the 70s when KHJ was doing so much marketing, the reason they were doing so much was Disney. It was not a high time for Disney. It was a sad period. Of course, Walt sadly had passed away in the late 60s. Walt Disney World was launched without him. All the focus for the company was on Walt Disney World. So Disneyland was really struggling to figure out its place. And it was not the high time for animation. Some great stuff came out, but certainly not the Renaissance. And Disneyland itself was sort of struggling as to what it was going to look like. So anyway, 90s, it had really started to turn around. Star Tours, and Indiana Jones Adventure, some really great stuff was going on. So that was very exciting to be in this time when all that new stuff was getting launched. But it was still Walt's park, in the sense that a lot of the rules he'd put in place were still very much in place. So for example, men, no facial hair whatsoever.
Wow.
No tattoos. You could not have any tattoos visible anywhere. Women could have discreet pierced ears if they were just like a little stud, but they could not have hoops or anything fancy. And we had so many regulations in terms of hygiene, and some of it actual rules and some of it guidelines, as it were. Highly suggested guidelines. And things like cotton underwear. You had to have cotton underwear in the summer. They would not allow.
Wow.
Because apparently that absorbed better or whatever. And that was important if you were going to be around guests all the time, and particularly in certain attractions where you were going to be really close to the guests.
I just have to, would someone check all this?
I wasn't going to ask.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Our lockers got checked. There was a lot of undercover police. And in fact, I mean, I have some stories about being in the break room and some crazy looking tourists coming in, like full on Hawaiian shirts and cameras around their necks and high top socks with sneakers. And they were undercover. You would never know.
Lord.
But they were busting people, of course, multiple times a day for shoplifting or for, trying to smoke out in certain attractions like Tom Sawyer Island.
Yes. Yeah, I know they're a very important part of security for sure.
Yeah. So yes, you were checked. And they were very strict about safety. So you got 3 shots. If you get up to 3 pink slips, and after 3 pink slips, you were out. I got 2.
Wow.
While I was during my summer. So it was an incredible.
Won't ask what for.
Well, I can one was an unfortunate, just a mishap that happened. I was working Storybook Land, and I was working Storybook Land because that was the only attraction where women could actually narrate. Because Jungle Cruise, we were not allowed. I'm so jealous of the women.
That's mind-blowing. Wow.
Well, yeah, it was different time.
Yeah.
Not nearly as woke or equal opportunity as it is now on a lot of levels.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still a fantastic place, and we were treated so well, and yeah, it was just fantastic. But no, I could not shoot at hippos and alligators and all that.
Wow.
I did be telling fairy tales on Storybook Land. And I've got only one picture that survives from that. I posted it a bunch, but only one picture of me as a cast member, which is kind of hilarious. But it got like the little 90s bow and the little haircut that was very much in vogue at the time. It was fun.
I'll have to look for that picture now. And I'm just glad you mentioned, just to transition away for 1 second here. You mentioned that you posted it. Your social media is unreal. I mean, if you're a Disney fan, you must follow Cat. You must. You post such you great videos, like behind the scenes stuff.
Thank you.
And yes, no, we're going to include the links to all your social media pages.
Thank
but
you.
you do such great videos, like, and you always you ask people like their Disney memories, and you post a lot of your own. I'm thrilled. I'm just in awe of that. How did that come about, like all your social media things? That Where do you get these clips? A lot of them too.
We create them. I mean, we create them from whatever I can. I've got some friends within Disney where sometimes, like, I'll request, do you have any elements I could use for this? But just a lot of research, a lot of indexing of stuff that I find on the internet. But then we spend a lot of time editing it together. Like the one
Hmm.
from this morning was awesome. That was with the early time lapses of Fantasyland being built, with narration by Tony Baxter. And then we add
Hmm.
music, and we add some special effects and some sound effects. And I spend about an hour and a half every night just editing it together, so that there's like a little story in the 2 minutes that will
Wow.
take you through some part of either early Disney studio history, or reference footage for any of the early animated classics, or um, how a particular ride got put together, actual footage. Like, to me, it's pretty awesome too, and it's one of my favorite times of the day to just sort of disappear into that nostalgia. But to me, it's so important. Not nearly as important as a lot of like the volunteer stuff that I work hard to do, or the fundraising. But to me, Walt's legacy and the Imagineers'
Hmm.
legacy is so deeply important, because it was it was a very good example. This is an understatement. It's an excellent example of a, a very brave, courageous, creative mind, Walt, having a vision for how to better things, or how to move things forward, how to drive technology forward in a way that would sort of benefit everybody. He had a lot more, as anybody who's into Epcot and all that kind of knows, he had a lot more vision for what the parks were supposed to be than just entertainment. And there was always supposed to be an underlying bit of education. And to him, being able to coalesce all of these amazing talents, all of these Imagineers
Hmm.
who were engineers and artists and mechanics, and people from Hollywood who thought he was on crack probably when he described what he was trying to accomplish. And yet they all kind of came together and created something that's lasted this long, and to most standards is the highest level of immersive entertainment that still is out there. Real, tangible entertainment versus, virtual reality. But it's, to me, really important that younger generations, current
Sure.
generations, upcoming generations understand that all of the stuff that they love, that they fan out about, that they geek out about, came from hardworking men and women who busted their butts
Hmm.
on deadline constantly against all odds to make something happen. And I guess for some reason that to me is always inspiring, working in Hollywood, but really any industry you go into. Walt's story is one of a lot of failures initially, a lot of bankruptcy, a lot of taking major risks, having no roadmap to get to where he wanted to get to. And I guess that to me is always an inspiring message. And the fact that it's become this major worldwide brand, it's nice to tie it all back to the men and women and Walt's vision for how do I make all this happen without even knowing if it was going to be a success.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, it's so well put. I remember it's only been even for me, having grown up working at the studio, I didn't know a whole lot about Walt or the history of the studio. I have
Sure.
some books, and some of them are around me right now that
Yeah,
I
I
used
see.
to pore over when I was a youngster, but I didn't know much about him until I read Neil Gabler's biography of him, and I
That was a
did
great
it.
book.
Yeah, I did it at a very specific time when I was going to Los Angeles to actually work on Race to Witch Mountain, and I thought, it's high time I'm going back and appearing in a cameo of a remake of my classic film. I think I need a little, know a little bit more about the man that created all of this, and I was overwhelmed with his story. So And I think it's fantastic that there are people like you out there doing this kind of work. You know, I make my small contributions how I can, you know, with the material I have from my past, but it's so much fun to see those things. I love it. I mean, behind the scenes is kind of like my middle name. I love that.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, whatever the industry is, you know, to learn something about how it came about, you know, and to remember, I mean, you know, his quote is, "It all started with a mouse," but it really all started as an idea. I mean, you know, it's all of this has come from ideas. And I live right outside the parks. My wife is a retired cast member. She was in guest relations at studios, and
oh wow,
we go all the time. You know, we spend a lot of time there, and I love being inside of the immersive entertainment concept as much as anyone. So anyway, that's my 2 cents to add on to yours. No, but yeah, I get it.
Beautifully said. I always make that joke, and I start out a lot of my captions saying, you know, people like to say it all started with a mouse, but really it all started with a dream.
Yes.
Or an idea. Yeah. So sometimes I change that and say with a train. Really, Disneyland itself started with a train, but
right.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I'm lucky and fortunate to be friendly with some of the Imagineers, some who sort of spanned that old generation to the new generation, some who are strictly new generation. And yeah, I love it. And I love nostalgia when it serves something other than just disappearing into the past for the sake of disappearing into the past. I love it when it feeds or inspires you, especially if you're in a downtime. And right now, you know, I think everybody can relate on some sense to this feeling of sort of hopelessness, or how do I get to the next step, or oh my gosh, I thought I was moving forward, now I'm moving backward. That the world has been faced to that many rounds lately. So yeah, definitely if you're on Twitter, I drop those at like 3:30 in the morning West Coast time, so that they hit 6:30 East Coast time, and they get a great response. So thank you for shouting that.
No, I will say this. I'm a huge Disney fan, and I've seen videos and, you know, content on your page that I've not seen anywhere else. So that is amazing to me. I mean, I look everywhere. I follow a lot of people, and your page to me is like by far the best that I've seen as far as Disney content. So no, really, it's just amazing. So definitely follow Cat. So
thank you.
I'll go back into now. You worked as a cast member, then you started transitioning into, you know, acting and show. As a matter of fact, I mean, I don't know how many times you didn't, because I watched your Murder, She Wrote episode this week. So I don't know how many times you get asked about that one.
Never. Although that's got another 6 degrees of separation to Ike, because that was the episode with what's her name, who was in the movie you just said, Race to Witch Mountain. What was her name? Perry?
Perry.
Yes.
She was dating David Duchovny while we were shooting Murder, She Wrote.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Reeves? Is that Reeves or something? Reeves or Leaves?
Yes, I think something like that. Yes. She was playing like Angela Lansbury's like bestie neighbor or something.
Right.
In this episode, and and I remember thinking, oh, that's funny, because she was then in Race to Witch Mountain. So there's
there you go.
Weird little connection.
Well,
yes, that's
what I was going to ask, because you had the Disney royalty there as well. You had Angela Lansbury. You worked in Diagnosis Murder with Dick Van Dyke. So
which there's stories there that, I mean, everybody who guest starred on Diagnosis Murder probably has a similar story. So this does not make me special, but I was I was on it twice, and in one episode I was a pregnant woman with ridiculously too large prosthetics. It was supposed to be a bombing. It was like a special episode, 2-part special episode where there's like a bombing in a restaurant, and of course I'm like on the brink of, you know, delivery, as everybody always is in a TV series. And so I had a few scenes with Dick where he's like, you know, down on the ground with me and just trying to get me to breathe and relax and all of that. I just called him Dick as if we're old. No, Mr. Van Dyke. But he was and again, everybody who's ever worked with him will have this story. But of course, at a quiet moment when we were all just sort of waiting for a reset, or everybody was sort of waiting for something because it was bomb effects and, you know, a couple of pyrotechnics. So we're all sort of quiet. And I finally got up the courage, probably, you know, well into 12 hours of shooting, to say, oh my God, you know, it's you. Um, and and not just that, but my grandparents were a huge fan of the Dick Van Dyke Show. So, you know, going further back, and anyway, so of course, without missing a beat, he starts to sing, "It's a jolly holiday with me." Come on, everybody. So now you got the whole set. We're all singing Jolly Holiday, and he starts doing, you know, Soft Shoe Tap. And he was like motioning for me to come up, and he was like, never mind, you got that giant thing strapped on you. But it was amazing. Got a couple of pictures with him. And Angela Lansbury, by the way, this is cool for any Broadway fans. When I met her, this was her thing. She wanted every guest star to come over and be introduced so that they would feel welcome. She wanted
that's
that.
great.
So they would lead me over to her while she was getting makeup retouched. And I said, Ms. Lansbury, I hope I don't insult you when I say this, but Sweeney Todd is my absolute favorite musical of all time, which is absolutely true. I don't know why that dark side is in me, but I was like, I absolutely love it. And she said, "Oh, God bless you, dear. You're the only young one who's ever been." She's like so thrilled that somebody actually of my generation was calling that as the
realized
major
it.
credit for her.
Wow.
She was so thrilled at that. So yeah, there you go. But to answer, to get us back on track, I did not go right into acting. I actually chickened out of it. I went to
Really?
Berkeley for school, and I got a scholarship for acting. I managed to convince them that they needed to have somebody aspiring to be an actor at UC Berkeley, which is not a school that necessarily puts its focus and funding, you know, so much into the dramatic arts department. It's much more, you know, more advanced sciences kind of a school in general. But they did a very decent theater department. So I was there on scholarship, and for some reason, after majoring in theater and Shakespeare and stage managing and stagecraft, I chickened out literally on graduation day, and took a job behind the scenes working at the William Morris Agency as a trainee to be an agent. And I did that for about 3 years, working in the literary department representing writers.
Wow, good grief.
So that's what I did until I was 25. And then I had this Nietzschean sort of like crazy existential, what am I doing with my life? And left a very secure job doing that to become a starving actor, and got really lucky because it was the mid to late 90s, and there was it was a good time to be pursuing on camera, because there was so much budget money for the networks. Cable was just starting. I mean, nothing like what it is today. Right?
Yeah.
Certainly no platforms. But there was so much funding going into the networks at this time. And this was the time where the joke was, if you're a stand-up comedian, they'll give you a sitcom when you arrive in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Because they were doing development deals all over the place.
Yeah.
And it wasn't yet the time when movie stars had allowed themselves to do television. Right. So it was still a very clear line. So anybody who was doing features was doing features. Even if they were supporting feature people, they didn't dare do television.
Right.
Which is crazy to think of that, because now we've got Meryl Streep, starring in Netflix series and all that. But it was a good time to try to break in.
And then you transition. What made you decide to go on into voiceover work right after?
I had a really disappointing experience on an NBC sitcom, which I will not name, but it was one of the must-see TV ones, and they literally kept rewriting what I had been cast on, and then I basically ended up without a role by the time they were done with it. And it also, having done theater, having loved working since I was always working, I was an assistant production coordinator for a TV movie at one point. And I I love the hustle and bustle and the busyness, and working at an agency, you get that in spades, like 24/7. And so suddenly doing the acting thing where you're on set for 12 to 15 hours, not doing very much, was
Mm-hmm.
was challenging for me. And what's weird is, like, we didn't have smartphones back then. We didn't have laptops. I remember doing, I was lucky enough to be on something opposite Michael York, and he had a full computer setup brought to his green room because he
Huh.
could afford it because he was Michael York. But we didn't have computers back then. So really you were just kind of stuck either reading the newspaper, reading a book, flirting with grips, eating craft services. There wasn't nearly as much to do. And I wasn't a writer. It probably would have been ideal if I were aspiring to be a writer. But there was just so much downtime, and it was hard for me to sit tight and be okay waiting for, 6 hours for my next shot or whatever. And I suppose
Right.
if I'd been, I didn't connect to the camera the way that, I think you need to, if you love that, if you want to do that for a living, you got to really love that dynamic. That's what makes a great,
Mhm.
a great on-camera talent. And I did not have that. I was somewhat suspicious of the camera, having come from theater. It was always a little bit alien to me, and I never quite got comfortable with it. Whereas the microphone, I for some reason fell in love with immediately. So
And what was your first role in in voiceover work? Do you remember that? Or
yeah, it was a um, fighter pilot in a CD-ROM game. Yes, a CD-ROM game. That's how far back yeah.
right?
That was my very
Well,
first role.
You have a lot of video game credits, which I'm amazed at that too.
I will find my honor in battle. Not even the stars are safe in the sky. Rank matters not, only true skill. I take no pleasure in this. It's just business.
But then you go into Dexter's Laboratory, Dee Dee, Dexter's Laboratory. How's that experience been?
Well, that was and I've been very candid about this in other interviews. That was just crazy luck. And it was replacing it was voice matching the original gal who had done it when it was just a pilot presentation that stemmed from a thesis that Gendy Tartakovsky had done at CalArts.
Dee Dee, what are you doing? Testing out my new camera. Say cheese! No! Ooh. Say cheese, Mr. Monkey! Say cheese, Mr. Top Secret Machine! Say cheese! Say cheese! Cheese! Ooh, cheese!
So it was a one-off pilot that he did, and then it got accepted by Cartoon, and then they aired it, and then they did like a vote thing where like your top 3, Cow and Chicken and Ed, Ed and Eddie and Dexter's Laboratory, all kind of got like a 3-episode or a 6-episode go. And this other gal was part of that. She'd been at CalArts with Gendy, so she had voiced it for the thesis. And then she wanted to do something else other than voiceover, so they cast for a voice match. And I was the lucky person who got it, but I wasn't. It was both a fantastic way to start. I've said this all the time. It was a fantastic way to start, and it was an awful way to start because I knew nothing. And I've wished to God I could go back in a time machine and kick the pants off of this little twerp I was so nervous and so out of my league that I was doing my best to put on a brave face. And, consequently, when you do that, you just you're closed off from other experiences you could have. I was just so nervous. And I was in a room full of the gods. They're still the gods, the gods of voiceover: Kath Soucie, Rob Bennett, Rob Paulson, Jeff Bennett, Chris Kavanaugh, who was next to me doing Dexter's Laboratory. Oh my God, she was so sweet to me. And then constant guest stars like Frank Welker
Yeah.
and
Oh,
Charlie Adler and Tom Kenny. It was his first, I think one of his first series doing animation. He was supporting characters for Dexter's
wow, wow.
Laboratory. And I remember him coming in and saying he got this amazing pilot at Nickelodeon called SpongeBob something. And who knew,
Yeah, something.
right?
So SpongeBob something. Yeah.
So it it was, fantastic. I'm very lucky. I don't want this to come off wrong, but I am being candid in saying I was really not ready for it and had to learn a lot of things, mic technique and everything on the job. And that's not ideal when you're in the room with legends. They
No,
didn't deserve that.
that's an incredibly intimidating group. I mean, I know
Yeah.
what animation I did, which every job I got, I was extremely excited about and just so proud to have been able to just make it past the audition process, let alone book something. And then, yeah, you're working with these people who are just, I mean, they were mountains to me. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I worked with Betty Davis and she didn't intimidate me as much as Frank Welker did. It just watching these people work was, I found myself just a jaw
Oh yeah.
agape and forgetting to read my lines because I was so much more interested in watching them work. So
Me
that's an
too.
interesting perspective, but yeah, I mean, that's very intimidating. It looks like you got over it though.
I mean, again, I wish I could go back because how I handled it, hindsight is 2020, but I was so nervous. And plus I was doing a voice match to the
Yeah,
original character.
that's crazy.
Yeah. So I couldn't even just relax and sort of feel like I was doing a good job with what I was bringing to it. Because when you do a character that you've sort of at least auditioned in in your own take on, at least
Sure.
you feel a little bit of ownership or connection to it. You developed that during the audition process. Or if you're just handed something and they say, Kat, we're just gonna have you do this role. But in this case, I was in the footsteps of someone who I considered a great actress because it was a great voice on a great series. And now I was the replacement
Hmm.
and 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 never even knew if I was getting close to the, as it turns out, Gendy sort of took the role in a different direction from where it had started. She was more of sort of a hippy dippy, chill. She wasn't the manic, annoying, crazy, shrill character that she became. That kind of gradually built up, and that crazy laugh that I, ended up bringing to it was that she started as one thing and then she kind of morphed into another because he had this great vision of how annoying and crazy and whack she could become. But yeah, all of it was just very overwhelming, and it was Gendy's, I think it was his first time directing something professionally. He was the voice director along with Donna
Mhm.
Grillo, who was the amazing casting director, and sort of assisted with that. But that side of it was kind of new to it. I was brand new to it, and I was so aware of who was in the room with, and they were in the room with me. So every mistake I made was just a triple, quadruple embarrassment. And it would have been so different if I had already been doing this
Right.
and had some idea, or if I wasn't doing a voice match that I wasn't even sure if I was nailing correctly. But very lucky. I'm not trying to say boo hoo me, but that's my honest answer. And I like to be candid about that, not for me, but to give again some encouragement to people that you may completely fall flat on your face and embarrass the heck out of yourself, but just kind of keep trying, keep going. Part of it, there was a lot of humiliating moments, I'm sure, where I was given a direction and went the complete 180. I'm sure everybody in the room was just like, who hired this chick? What is she doing in this room?
Well, well, voice matching is absolutely. I briefly touched upon this with Ike before, but voice matching is incredible to me. That I mean, you've covered for Joan Cusack. We said in Jesse in the Rides. You've done for Julia Roberts. You've done for Keira Knightley. I saw how does that work? I mean, just they have just people that can you do this? Can you pull this off? They just approach you. Do you think you can match her voice?
Sometimes, I mean, some of the loop group leaders will just send it to me directly and say, "Can you try this?" But I mean, usually you're auditioning. They're auditioning a handful of people or going wide on something. But for so voice matching is sort of when you completely try to imitate so completely the voice of a celebrity or the person who was doing the role that you cannot tell the difference between, which is different from impersonation, which is what Robin Williams did, where the idea is that it's funny and that you're kind of, in a sense, mocking or exaggerating features of that voice, like he did with the genie, or any stand-up comedian does. That's impersonation. Voice matching is where you go the opposite. You try to be so subtle that nobody can tell. And I've been really honored to voice match for pretty much, you know, a lot of the, you know, A-list female celebrities. And I love it because it's not voiceover. It's more a scientific is going to sound way too formal, but you're getting in there to the minutia of what the mouth is doing, what the tongue is doing, what the lips are doing, what the vocal tone is doing, how much texture, what kind of dialect, any regionalism, and you're breaking it down to the minutia and then putting it all back together and seeing if you can create this audio illusion where you trick people into it sounding like them. And sometimes it comes easier. I mean, I've been doing it for about 25 years plus, so sometimes I can just sort of hook into it, or sometimes it literally will take a day and a half of really studying and listening to the voice. And I mean, there's certain voices that I'll never be able to replicate because what's going on for their vocal cords is so grossly, you know, so different from mine, like Scarlett Johansson. She's got amazing what we call broken pipes, or that sort of raspy husk that really are, I mean, technically damaged vocal cords, not really, but you know, sort of creates that amazing sound, that amazing huskiness. But yeah, I love it. And I'm upset. It's like my geek thing. I'm obsessed with it. Like if you give me a voice match and if I know that I'm getting close to it, I'll keep on it. You have to literally rip the audition away from me up to the last minute because I will just keep working it to get closer and closer and closer. We all have our things that we're obsessed with, but that for some reason is one of the things I absolutely love, is how close can I trick the ear into it sounding like that talent. I voice matched Sigourney Weaver for Solar Opposites, which is a show that's out now. Awesome show by the Rick and Morty creators.
Yes.
And there's an episode where she's like the special guest along with Idris Elba. I'm not sure how, but she's like, you know, the god of sci-fi geeks or something in this. And she appears as sort of this goddess vision. But that was a lot of fun. I've voice matched Sigourney a bunch. She's just an amazing voice, amazing actress, you know, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. And how surreal is it for you to hear your voice on these rides, you know, that you're going in, you know, the Toy Story ride.
Time for Woody's Roundup.
Rightio, Sheriff Woody. You're the Silver Star. Time for rootin' tootin' shootin'. Woo-wee, you've gotten good.
And I need to ask you about Haunted Mansion too. I mean, you know, hearing your voice coming in, you know, you were, from what I read, is this right? You're the only update all these years in Haunted Mansion? Your character, Constance?
I don't think the only, well, she's the first.
The bride.
Let me say this right. She's the first new character, fully realized new character that speaks, that's been added to the mansion since it was created in 1969, and the only female, obviously, lead character, you know, in any of the classic attractions. They've added Red the pirate,
right,
not quite as featured a role, and Red was sort of replacing, you know, the auctioned redhead from before.
Yes.
So this is the first new one, I guess, and fully realized with the backstory and who speaks and all of that. So that's a huge honor. And it is surreal. It's the only way to say it. It's surreal, especially having grown up, you know, loving all the Disney attractions. They were the reason I went into voiceover. So it's an amazing honor.
For better or for worse. I do. I did. In sickness and in
I spoke to you briefly before we started filming. Now, the Haunted Mansion is by far my favorite ride, and I love I love the ride there. You said that it's not yours, which just crushed me. What's yours? What's your favorite ride?
I'm for 2 seconds. I'm just gonna say, how are you doing, Rob King?
I'm good.
Good. Okay. I'm so honored. I got to shout him out. I'm so honored to be at one of the top video game motion capture voiceover studios in Hollywood doing this right now on a Sunday, Green Street Studios. Look him up.
Fantastic.
Rob is amazing, and he's doing this. He's taking off of his Sunday with his family to.
Thank you.
allow us
We're
to-
nearing the
wow.
end. So yes, thank you.
Yes,
So-
very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he
We are
deserves
near
full-
the end.
full
Just to
props.
let Rob know. So, yes.
So there's my little product placement.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, obviously the mansion is incredible and I love it. And believe me, I always loved going on it. And I would say that it's a kind of experience now where the whole reason we love these attractions, and Ike, and you said it beautifully at one point too, to be surrounded, to be immersed in, you get to lose yourself. You get to, it's like a vacation for a day or 2
Yep.
days or however long.
Mhm.
It truly is not just like going to Hawaii or Switzerland or somewhere fabulous where you are enjoying the environment, but it's real, it's organic. You're still you're tied to reality for the most part. Except if you're staying in one of these lofty, amazing 4-season resorts where you feel like you're a character in Fantasy Island. But for the most part, you go to those and you're still you still have your family stuff. But the whole purpose of Disney parks is to really lose yourself, to really, goes so deep. Even the pavement that you're walking on is designed to sort of help bring you into whatever you're supposed to be in, the smells, the sounds. It's supposed to lift you out of yourself for the day. And that's why so many people love it, especially if you're going through a challenging time or don't necessarily love your particular circumstances right now. It's a great way to, just sort of take a vacation from that for a day in the best sense possible. And I hope I said that right or well.
Yes.
And so for me to go onto the mansion now, I always brace myself at the ballroom scene. Literally, like there's always this like gut clenching feeling that, oh my God, I'm gonna have to listen. And like every actor, there's things I hear that I'm like, oh, I wish I'd done that differently. I can't help it. Like that's my voice. And so it rips away the whole fun.
It pulls you out.
Yeah, I've actually tried to go through it now, like closing my ears and like I try to go through it singing to myself so that I can continue the feeling of being in the mansion. I know that's weird.
Well, no, it makes
but
it makes
that
perfect
happens to be
sense
the
to me.
reality
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Well, I think
Great
you did
character,
great.
though.
Yes, I loved it. I thought you did great. So,
Thank you. And they did do great. It's a fantastic character. I'm not
Yes.
criticizing the character at all. It's just like I hear my voice, and they did a beautiful job with it. The first time I heard the sound effects, I was blown away. The sort of reverse, you can sort of hear a little bit of reversing and the whooshing and I think there's like someone told me there was about 16 layers of sound effects put onto my voice to
Wow.
make it as ethereal, and there's like little subtle things going on in it. So it's pretty special.
I'm not letting you off the hook. Which is your favorite ride, though?
It changes.
Does it?
I mean, it really changes depending on my mood in the day.
Okay.
I can tell you my top 5.
Let's hear.
Okay. Tom Sawyer Island that used to be, which is no longer there, breaks
Oh.
my heart.
Oh, mine too. My gosh. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to
Right?
interrupt, but boy, I'm with you.
I have a tree. I have pictures of me in my tree that the, not stormtroopers, the little F trooper dudes who would walk around looking like Civil War police. They would have to yank me out of every time I was there. I'd climb up into my tree. It was a real tree. It wasn't a tree that you were supposed to climb into. And yeah, that place, that Tom Sawyer Island Disneyland was Mecca for me, and I could spend hours there. I feel like I did when I was a kid. I know my dad had to, force me to go back on the raft back to the mainland. And I think that was it too, was like taking the raft, you really felt like as a kid you were departing from your life. And again, Little Miss Trouble, going through parents going through a divorce. There was a lot for me that was very happy to escape for a minute into whatever fantasy. So I loved it. And I really connected with the rusticness. Um, my bedroom actually is an homage to Frontierland. Never allow pictures of it, but literally down to little benches. It's sort of a recreation of Frontierland. I loved Tom Sawyer Island. And they used to have a market in the fort. What's it called? Was it Fort Wilderness at Disneyland? Yeah,
Yes.
the fort was Fort Wilderness.
Yes.
And you'd shoot the little rifles because it was politically fine at the time. And you get like hot cider and dill pickles in the little market.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I so remember those dill. Oh my God, those
yes.
are the best sour pickles in the world. and hot cider, and that was I'm so brokenhearted. That particular version of Tom Sawyer Island is no longer, and they've closed the fort, permanently.
Right.
And then what else? I love Peter Pan's Flight.
Oh,
Always
same.
have.
Yeah.
I think
That's in my top 3 also. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliantly created. And Pirates. Of course, absolutely love Pirates. And was thrilled at the realization of it. Its first, the first movie, I thought they did an amazing job of bringing that to life against all odds. And yeah, I'd say those are sort of my top hits. I love Indiana Jones Adventure. Wait, is that what it's called? Now I'm getting all stuck with all my different. But yeah, I love that ride. I think they did an amazing job with that ride. I could go on it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too, and I miss that at Disneyland. At Disney World, they have a version of it that's called Dinosaur, so it's a completely different themed ride for exactly the same track and the same cars and the same movement concept as Indiana Jones, but it's just not not nearly as good. Yeah.
Dinosaur. Okay. Wait, did you say Indiana Jones is not at Disneyland? Or are you saying
it's at Disneyland? Going to it? Yeah, I miss going to it at Disneyland. Here at the Disney World. Not Magic Kingdom. It's at gosh darn it.
Animal Kingdom.
Animal Kingdom. Yeah,
right,
they have a dinosaur land at the Animal Kingdom Park, and the dinosaur ride is the duplicate of the Indiana Jones ride, but it's themed completely differently. It's
got it.
Going back in time and saving a near extinct dinosaur from dying out, and the T-Rex comes out and attacks you in the cart and all this kind of stuff. It's quite thrilling, but for some reason that Indiana Jones ride is just, to me, is just fantastic. I love it. So I miss going to that one in a big way.
Yeah. They used it's a flight simulator, of course, in the Jeep, and they just do a brilliant job with all of it, and really feeling like you're in that Jeep. And the music, the theme song, like you could probably just be sitting still and feel like you're on an adventure with that amazing theme song, that music. But yeah, it's brilliant attraction. So there you go.
Before I let you go, I just want to transition something, if it's okay with you. I read your story is truly inspiring, and I don't know how many people know this. You had cancer, you had a whole lot of reconstructive surgery, and you've overcome it, and you had a long road back, and you persevered. Can you just tell us a little about them, if you don't mind? I was truly inspired reading your story.
Thank you. That's really, really kind of you and both of you I'm happy to, it's something that I have started to talk about professionally, doing some keynote speaking and professional speaking about, but it was an unexpected left turn in my life that there was no warning. There was no lead up to it, no symptoms that were, and I say that out loud because it truly was one of those cliche moments of literally out of thin air, out of the blue, just suddenly diagnosed with something not just scary, but supposedly fatal. And it was a trip down the rabbit hole, a fall down the rabbit hole that was almost endless for a while. And it just kind of went from horrible to even more horrible to devastating to just kill me now, because how am I ever going to find my way out of this blackness? And it's crazy to talk about it now in hindsight, because sometimes I tell my story and then part of my brain is going, was that me starring in that? That was
Right.
like weird to, you, life is about healing. You sort of move forward. And fortunately, if you make it through something like that, part of you is always stuck in it and associated with it. And part of you slowly starts to disengage from it. That's part of the healing process. So to talk about it sometimes is also a surreal experience. But yeah, I got diagnosed back in 2012 with something that they couldn't even, I mean, initially there was a lot of misdiagnosis. So potentially a brain tumor,
Oh,
potentially
wow.
bone tumor. Like they didn't know what, but they knew that it was something that was very rare and something that never really showed up, particularly in a young female. And what made it so rare is it's this vicious, sneaky form of sarcoma that I describe it sometimes as like it's a gumball, like those gumballs that you get at the car wash or whatever. It's candy coated on the outside, and then there's something else hidden inside. That candy coating meant that on an MRI, a traditional MRI, it shows up as completely benign. It literally is
Oh,
coated
Good
in
grief.
something that is, so it's very sneaky and covert. And what happens is as you get older and the body starts to change somewhere around your 60s, 65, that candy coating disintegrates, and then suddenly that vicious cancer goes viral, and in a heartbeat you're dead. That's what
oh,
happens to most people. I was the weird, rare diagnosis where we caught it ahead of that. And they just had enough information finally from Germany. That's where Germany's so far ahead of us on so many levels medically, that it came back with that diagnosis. Dermatofibrosarcoma protuberans is its technical name. And it was underneath my brain skull cavity and behind my jaw. And once it was clear what it was, some surgeons said they couldn't work on it because if they tried to remove it, they would break the candy coating shell and it would go viral. So
oh
they
my
didn't
gosh.
want to risk touching it. Others said that it may just stay, it was a ticking time bomb, but to leave it alone
Wow.
because maybe it won't ever. It was
Hmm.
like, yeah. And it was a real dark journey to realize the medical community. I was so naive. So many of us are. We just assume doctors and surgeons go into what they're doing because they really do want to save people.
Right.
That's what TV's about. That's what the movie's
Hmm.
about. That's what they're like. And
Right.
I never faced something this dire. And suddenly I was facing a lot of medical experts, all male, none of them were female, who said that they either didn't want to work on it, or if they did go in, I would be permanently disfigured and I would lose my ability to speak because it
Oh
was
my gosh.
it was attached to the facial nerve. So not to get too deep or upsetting here, we went from Disney magic to this, but it was deeply,
Yes,
deeply traumatizing. And
I'm sure.
finally, an amazing surgeon, Dr. David Alessi, who was on the board at Cedars-Sinai, had just left the board, I think, but he was a real specialist in ear, nose, and throat and cancer and brain surgery. He said that he felt he could probably get in and out clean,
Right.
meaning that after serious surgeries, reconstructive surgeries, I'd be back to being pretty much myself, or at least
Sure.
physically, and slowly regain my ability to speak because I was paralyzed for the first few months. Coming out of it, I couldn't speak.
Hmm.
So that's that trip down that rabbit hole, and it took a lot of rehabilitation, a lot of surgeries, follow-up surgeries, procedures, and then there was things I faced with the healthcare companies. They truly were marginalizing females, and some of the
Hmm.
reconstructive surgery got coded as elective,
Wow.
chosen.
Wow.
So I've learned a lot, and there's probably a lot more to learn, and I'm lucky. Um, I say that because I don't feel like I was lucky on a lot of levels because I had to go through a devastating 9-year recovery,
Right.
and it's still a process sometimes, but at least lucky enough to be here and to be able to move forward. And I say that knowing full well that it sounds awful to say not entirely lucky, because there's so many people with devastating diagnoses that will never
Right.
recover.
Hmm.
And I'm that's why I do so much to try to do giveaways and the volunteer work and contribute to pediatric cancer, because I'm so keenly aware that there's so much that people struggle with that they'll never, at this point, fully recover from.
But you mentioned, no, yes, you mentioned that it's not, going from Disney to that, but you know what? I do think your story is an inspiration. I do think, you fought, you persevered, and you went through a lot, and, it's very easy to get knocked down and give up. And you didn't do that. So I do think that your story is something to be admired, and that other people, can help other people as well.
Thank you. I hope so, but I say that knowing just that when I got diagnosed, I Googled a lot to try to find something that seemed similar to my diagnosis or what I was, and I couldn't find a lot. And so my hope is just that more and more of these stories are out there, so that if someone is given a devastating, that seems like a life-ending kind of a diagnosis, that they understand that of course it's going to feel life-ending. And that if you just take these little baby steps to just try to get to the next day, or find one moment where you can move forward a little bit, it can ultimately lead to emerging from it. And I know not always, but a lot of times, sometimes there is some sort of a way forward.
Absolutely. Well, again, we thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, this was great. Great guest, great stories, and please follow Cat on social media. We're going to put your links, but you are a great follow for many reasons. And again, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you both. Bye.
And this has been Cat Cressida. Thank you for joining us here at Pop Culture Retro. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.